Hi, good evening, and welcome as I bring you another little bit of tidbit of information. And this time it's from Robert Redfield, Dr. Robert Redfield, who was the past CDC director. And he has recently been interviewed by Dr. Drew, and I've seen this on Twitter under the chief nerd, giving everybody credit for what they've done. And he has about a 3-minute discussion talking about the mRNA vaccines and his views on them now. It's important to note that Dr. Redfield was in the CDC lead position between 2018 to 2021. And so what that meant is that he was integral in terms of trying to coordinate the rollout of vaccines. An important point is that it doesn't seem that when the vaccines were rolled out that he was in agreement with vaccine mandates, and that seems to be a difference in his thinking. But with that in mind, it's important to note that his views are not necessarily the consensus views of the scientific community. And a lot of people don't like what it is that he is saying. So just to give you some context there, as he speaks about his views, I will interject intermittently to give you some of my thoughts. So let's get started listening to this short clip from an interview with Dr. Drew. Here we go.
I don't recommend anybody who's not highly vulnerable get vaccinated at all, right?
Yeah.
Secondly, even among the highly vulnerable now, I no longer recommend the mRNA vaccines because when I give you an mRNA vaccine, I turn your body into a spike protein factory. I don't know how much you're going to make, and I don't know how long you're going to make it. That makes me nervous. And
I'll pause that there. It's an important point. And one of the questions that I'd asked previously is that when we think about what happened in the pandemic and what the recommendations are for people who are at higher risk, the recommendation is very often talking to the vaccinated cohort. You're high risk, you're already vaccinated, you need your boosters. And one of the things that doesn't come out is that they are not recommending it directly, even before Robert Kennedy came into position. They were not driving it home, the point about the unvaccinated who were in theory in the high risk groups. I think this is just because they have recognized that if they were high risk and they have already been exposed to the virus and didn't have severe COVID or already have natural immunity, they are at very low risk for ongoing issues. It's not that they can't, but they are at very low risk for it. And what in effect they are saying subtly, in my view, is that they are saying that for the vaccinated cohort who are high risk, you may need to continue getting booster vaccines. But they haven't attempted to explain why that may be the case. But let's continue to listen to what was being said.
I've seen some patients that are clearly still making it 6 months later. So I've moved to just using the killed protein vaccines made by Novavax in those individuals that are highly vulnerable. But for those individuals that are not highly vulnerable, they should not. The COVID vaccine has no role. Now, it's going to be problematic and people like you are going to have to help communicate this effectively. I'll try if I get the opportunity. I know the FDA is reviewing the toxicity issues on the COVID vaccines, so we can be honest about the vaccine injury, which is real. And I have a number of patients, and I think what you're going to see them report, sadly, is the number of children that actually died from the mRNA vaccines.
Now, this is an important point to pause at again. And what is now being able to be openly stated is that vaccine injuries are real, one. If you didn't know, at the time early in the pandemic, when people were talking about vaccine injuries, they were literally removed from social media because they were spreading disinformation, notwithstanding the fact that they had taken the vaccine and then had ongoing injuries. Many in the scientific community will say, have you proven that it is necessarily the vaccine that is causing their symptoms? So it's still not necessarily accepted. And as a result, this has been pushed under the carpet. It is probably one of the worst things that I have seen in the pandemic is the fact that vaccines were mandated. Some people got injured, and instead of being supported, they were pushed out of sight and ignored. I have always said that anyone who is involved in doing that should not be trusted to continue to advocate for the health and well being of the population. But let's continue to listen.
And as you and I know, they didn't need to be vaccinated in the first place. It was government overreach. And these vaccines should have never been mandated. I was very upset with CDC a year ago when they recommended everybody over the age of 1 month of age get the COVID vaccine. Based on what data? There's no data to support that. So I'm happy with Kennedy. People may jump on Kennedy as him being anti-vaccine. I don't think Secretary Kennedy's anti-vaccine. I think he wants honesty about our discussion of vaccines.
Yeah, this is a very important point. One of the strategies that is being used is that if you raise questions, you are considered to be anti-vaccine. And it's not really the fact that people necessarily believe it. It's just the fact that they are trying to put people on the defense, that they therefore don't raise or ask questions. Asking questions should be accepted. It should be encouraged. Proving and demonstrating safety should also be encouraged. And so when you have members of the scientific community or members of the public asking questions about safety, about efficacy, it doesn't necessarily mean that anyone is anti-vaccine. And now, listen, it's an important point, just in case anyone is listening who is very pro-vaccine. One of the greatest pieces of damage that has been done is that the general public perceive all vaccines similar to COVID vaccines. So meaning that COVID vaccines were not particularly effective at reducing transmission, maybe for a few months, up to 4 months after you'd had it. And it has a number of negative side effects, which we can argue about. But what then happens is that if you promote that, and you stand by it, what it means is that the general public will therefore automatically assume this is the same standard for the measles vaccine, same standard for the rubella, all these other vaccines that had been tried and tested. And I think that that kind of approach has done tremendous damage to public trust in terms of understanding what's happening. But let's continue to listen.
What data do we have about their safety? What data do we have about their efficacy? I see people, including myself, when I say, well, what do we know about vaccine injury? Immediately people jump at me and say, you're anti-vaccine? No, I just want to know, what do we know about vaccine injury? Or if I ask the question, do we really have any data that there's a benefit from a 1-month-old getting a COVID vaccine? Oh, you're against vaccines. No, I'm not against vaccines.
Pausing here again. Now, this is a really, really important point because there's a paper, I haven't yet discussed it, and it's a JAMA paper. It's a big study looking at reinfection. Not really a comparison between vaccinated and unvaccinated, but there are two cohorts where they look at their reinfection risks. And one of the things that came out, and this was specifically in children, looking at the reinfection risk, looking at the long COVID risks, and it was positioned mainly as to encourage or support the need of vaccination in children. One of the things I will say is that I don't believe that you can use long COVID as the marker and as the measure for whether or not vaccines are beneficial, COVID vaccines are beneficial in children. It was always about severe disease, and they so rarely get severe disease that I had never thought that the risk-benefit equation worked. But even in that study, even though they were not directly comparing the unvaccinated and the vaccinated, it showed that the cohort who were vaccinated had a higher risk of reinfection. So So that goes completely against the idea that the vaccines were being used to prevent infection in children. Just thought I'd make that point. But let's continue to listen to the end.
Show me the benefit. Where's the data? There is no data. So I think we finally got the COVID vaccines in the right place. Very, older people over 65, significant vulnerabilities from diabetes or hypertension, obesity. But I think the rest of it should go the way of the RSV vaccine, and we should really stop promoting this. The fact that they required, I saw some patients the other day, really problematic. Life has been changed in their 20s because in order to go to college, they had to get this vaccine. Exactly. And guess what happened?
Why can't they sue the college? They should sue those colleges. They really should.
As you said, he got myocarditis. They had this 22-year-old had a heart attack.
Oh, terrible. It's terrible.
And yes, they're right. That is terrible. I mean, when I think about it, I've covered this in the past with regards to the college mandates in the United States. I mean, whoever was involved in making those decisions at university levels broadly in what was clearly a low-risk cohort to mandate them and not allow them to go to university if they weren't vaccinated, and then to not take seriously vaccine injuries is terrible. I don't want to use that stronger word, but it is terrible. You have to realize that when people talk about vaccine injuries, they talk about it as, okay, it's just rare, don't worry too much about it. Yes, it can happen. That, for one, is not good enough. If you can't delineate exactly the mechanism of what causes the vaccine injury, the spike protein is given. Is it the spike protein? Is it the lipid nanoparticle? Is it an allergic response? What is it? That has not really ever been clearly delineated. And that indicates that there is not a great interest in understanding injury and understanding why it occurs. These are the kinds of situations that absolutely destroy trust from the public in terms of the general scientific community. I would like to encourage everyone who is still scientific, please, what you must do now is be honest, look at where the failings occurred, look at what could have been done better, acknowledge where harms have occurred, and try and see if we can repair this huge damage that has happened. There's still a long way to go. And even with Dr. Redfield, for those of you who know that I've followed Gert van den Bosch, now you have to realize that in the context of what he was doing here, and I'm going to show you what Gert said in relation to that comment. Let me just see if I can find it here. Gert made a comment on this specific video where Redfield was discussing, and here is what he said on Twitter. And I don't know if you can see this here. I'll try and see if I can make it bigger. And this is Gert here. I'll not read it out. Essentially, he thinks that he's a hypocrite on it. I clearly remember him recommending the vaccines during an offline panel discussion and saying that he thought it was a good idea to even vaccinate his grandchildren. He's afraid of retaliation and is now trying to cover his beep. How disgusting. Now, you know that Gert tends not to mince his words, and sometimes that can get him into trouble. But that's clearly how some people view it. However, I do accept the fact that at least he's trying to speak out. At this point, so many people refuse even to try and make an apology and to make amends for what happens. Is that even if that was his view in the past, at least he's trying to rectify what happens in the current situation. So thank you all very much. Just keeping you up to date with the science and the news and what's happening across the world and giving you some insights. Remember, like, subscribe, share, and comment. look in the description. There's other information about humming heroes and how you can protect your sinuses from this virus. So thank you all very much and have a great evening.
A hero, an immune adventure. Humming Heroes, your lyrical guide to the body's defenders. Now on Amazon. Check the links below.